Lauren. I'm one of the interpretive rangers at the park, and this is one of my favorite times of the year because we are a reenactment park. So December through April, when I'm not wearing my Smokey Bear hat patrolling the trails, I am out here dressed like in this fancy getup, giving you guys a little taste of the 16th century. So we like to give different talks about different aspects of the expedition. Sometimes we talk about the animals, the different roles that people play, the motivations for them coming here. But right now I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about some of the weapons. And have you guys seen the film in the visitor center yet?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So by the time you guys leave here, you'll be experts on DeSoto. Well, so you know you had nothing to do with that car, right? Nothing to do with Chrysler. Awesome. Well, we are out here to commemorate the expedition of this guy named Hernando DeSoto, who was a conquistador from Spain, and he lands in what we call La Florida in 1539. And so he's one of the first people that's really going to delve into the inner southeastern region of the United States. Now, there are other Spanish explorers here before. Florida was no new news to Spain, but it had yet been conquered. There has been no permanent settlement. They did not colonize. They never set up a trade route, and they never found that empire of gold or converted the natives like they sought out to do. So DeSoto is going to come over here and do something that those other explorers were unable to do, such as Ponce de Leon, the discoverer of Florida, and this guy named Narvaez. And also, since those explorers were here before, you can imagine the Native Americans knew of the Spanish brutality before DeSoto gets here. And so, of course, when you think DeSoto gets here, do you think the Native Americans are all that enthusiastic?
Oh, yeah.
And they're like, hey, welcome to Florida, come on board. Welcome back. So glad you have us. No, definitely not the case. So when you have, with the Native Americans, once they saw DeSoto's ships sailing by, you would have seen smoke signals or heard trumpet calls, warnings surrounding tribes that dun dun dun, the Spanish were back. And so obviously there was a clash of cultures, and so we're going to talk about some of the weapons that both the Spanish brought with them and the ones that they had to compete against that the Native Americans had. So, all right. First things first, hand-to-hand combat, what we call melee warfare. As you can see, even though these cultures were separated not only by thousands of miles of distance, but also thousands of years before contact, they still have this same idea when it comes to hand-to-hand warfare. Figure if you hit something over the head hard enough, it'll eventually do the trick. Well, of course, the Spanish have this technology known as metal. And so they're definitely going to bring a lot of these brutal weapons with them. And so the Native Americans, they have to use what resources they have available. So all their weapons and tools are made out of bone, shell, and of course wood. This is an example of a war club made from a mangrove root. As you guys notice, there's no lack of mangroves here in Florida. It covers about 2/3 of our shoreline. And so they would have made a weapon like this from a mangrove root, and they would use this technique called fire hardening. Now, this is a very interesting technique where they make it a lot more durable by sort of baking it. So to do that, they're going to dig a hole in the ground about 1 foot deep, bury this, cover it up, and then build a fire on top of it. So the point isn't to burn this, but it's to dehydrate it. Drop all that moisture and make it a lot harder and a lot more durable. Now, I've been whacking this around pretty hard for the last 2 years, and so have a lot of other people, and this is over a decade old. I know that. And so, as you can see, it hasn't really rotted away or turned into mulch, and there's, other than a few nicks and cracks in it, it's still all together. So a true testament to how it really did do the trick. They would use that for their arrows as well. Now, the Europeans have a lot more brutal weapons, and these holes that you see here are not for aerodynamics. These would have been filled with something. Any guesses as to what?
Some sort of poison or something?
Nope. Through these holes, you would have had hooks or spikes or nails, something to make it a lot more deadly. Because in Europe, who are the Spanish fighting before they come over to the New World? Other Europeans. You have the 700-year war with the Moors. That's what united Spain. And so you have other European entities such as the Germans, the French, the Turks, the Brits. You know, you have all these other cultures that have the same technology when it comes to armor, plate mail, chain mail, etc., and swords. So if you guys are both having, you know, this metal technology and armor, you kind of got to get creative and coming up with these brutal ways to be able to pierce through puncture through all that heavy metal. And so this would be used somewhat like a can opener to either pry that soldier out of his armor and pierce through it and maybe bash his helmet into his skull. Things like that. You have to pass that around.
Try that.
Needs a rolling pin, doesn't it?
Sure does.
It kills on both ends.
Yeah, but I imagine they were strong enough to hold it.
Now this next weapon is something that's found on pretty much any continent. There's always, whether it be Europe, Asia, Africa, and of course here in the New World, you find sort of a bow and string and arrow concept in pretty much every culture. And so for the Native Americans, the longbow is their apex weapon. And they would receive, a young Native American boy would receive their first bow around the age of 7 or 8. And they would practice with it every single day. And so they would play Native American games like Chunky, which is where you take a round stone. There's an example of one in our visitor center under glass. Or they would take a piece of clay and mold it like a hockey puck. And so they would toss that and use that as target practice. And also for hunting small animals like rabbits and squirrels and things of that nature, they would become very, very proficient with this weapon. So good that they could shoot up to 30 arrows a minute. And 9 times out of 10, you're hitting exactly what you're aiming at because they were so used to firing this weapon. Now for the Europeans, even though DeSoto does bring some archers with him, most likely for hunting, their skills probably would have been no match for the Native Americans because the longbow in Europe goes out of fashion by the 16th century with the invention of the crossbow, which we'll talk about momentarily. But also, they use it a lot differently in Europe because in Europe you have what's called formal warfare. And so their archers are going to be lined up on a hill or up on a high ridge, and they're just going to cast arrows up into the sky and have them rain down on your opposing army. Whereas Native Americans are using this like a sniper rifle to pinpoint and target a specific individual. And so they were so good that they would have been able to aim for places that that shiny metal stuff wasn't covering, such as the hands, the feet, the face, or maybe even the groin. Ouch. And so a lot of conquistadors and on the expedition definitely fell to several Native American arrows. Now, next weapon we have is the crossbow. Now, it takes the same elements of the longbow and simplifies it. By putting it horizontal and adding metal, you're going to make it 2 things. 1, a lot more accurate, and 2, a lot more powerful. See this little notch right here, and the 2 endpoints right here? Well, when that bow line is snapped, it's going to come back to the same spot every single time. So whereas, the longbow, whereas it takes years and years to master, and it's the reason why it's still an Olympic sport today, with the crossbow, its ease of use makes it to where anyone can pick up the skill in just a couple of hours. So if I could take any drunk out of a pub, sober him up, and within an hour or 2, he'd be good to go on my expedition as a crossbowman. And same thing, if you're on the expedition, you say the crossbowman falls, well, the pig herder could just pick up the crossbow, and now he's a crossbowman. It's the ease of use.
May I ask you something?
Of course.
What is the little stand on the front of it for?
This is what you put your foot on, kind of like a
You
stirrup,
pull back.
and you pull that bow line back. So this is a much smaller crossbow than the ones that they would have had on the expedition. This is for demonstration purposes by 5'5" weekly and park rangers like myself. So this has about a 50 to 60 pound pull. Actually, no, I think this has an 80 pound pull, and the bow has about a 40, 50 pound pull. But they would have had crossbows that went anywhere from 200 pounds up to 1,200 pounds. And you would need this device called a goat's foot, which is basically like a crank in order to pull that bow line back.
Did you know the Chinese attached a box and they could fire 60 arrows a minute?
Amazing. I'm going to attempt to do this, and we'll see how well I did it. Last time I tried, I only got 1 arrow in the target. The Native Americans would have been so skilled and highly trained with this weapon that they would have been able to use it in a multitude of ways. They would be able to attack their enemy standing still, or, this is the complicated part, on the move. Or they would hide behind the thickness of the trees. See? I would never get one. And the Spanish would think that they were fighting ghosts almost. Because you would never see them. All you would see is arrows flying. Now you guys heard that soft thud that went into the target? Let's see if the crossbow makes a little bit bigger of an impact.
Wow.
So, as you can see, not only is it a lot more powerful, but a little bit more accurate. Now, this brings me to the 16th century Matchlock arquebus. Everybody say, ooh, ah.
Heavy.
Now, second there, I'll light my match cord real quick. But I don't like to use a lighter, so let's see if I can quickly. Go. It takes a couple seconds. And there it goes. So it's a matchlock because I need this burning piece of rope known as a match cord as my primary lighting source in making this bad boy go boom. Now, back then, there was no manufacturer of arms, there was no gunsmiths, there was no ye old pawn shop or anything you could go to get a weapon like this. So if you wanted to carry this around and be an arquebusier, well, guess what? You had to make it yourself. Well, in order to do that, you had to go to 3 different people to get the supplies that you needed. So there are 3 main parts that make up this bad boy. First, you're going to go to a locksmith who's going to manufacture you a locking mechanism. Second, you're going to go to a carpenter. He's going to make you a nice stock. And last but not least, you need to go to the blacksmith so he can make you a nice long barrel. So when you get home, you have all the 3 things that you need, which is your lock, stock, and barrel. Lock, stock, and barrel. So if there's anything you take away from today, just remember that. Now, there's a couple things about this gun. Unlike guns of today, this is very, very inaccurate. So the safest person to be back then when this was fired was the person that you were aiming at. The person right in front of it. And that's for a couple of reasons. Because this is what we call pre-rifling. There is no groove in the barrel that causes the projectile to spin. Also, the projectile that goes down here is an ovoid, weird-shaped object. It's not a perfect sphere musket ball like you would think, because metallurgy is still somewhat in its infancy. So when it was pressed on that former, you're going to have a little ridge going around it. We have some examples over here on the table. So you have this ovoid-shaped object going down this smooth bore barrel, and it does not fit perfectly down here like bullets do now in a chamber. So when this thing is fired, it literally just bounces and ping-pongs its way out. And so who knows which way it's really going to go. It's like golfing. You ever manage to hit a straight golf ball? Yeah, it either goes, you hook it or you slice it, right? So well, that's the same concept, because this was designed for formal warfare. This was designed for hundreds of men lined up in this nice big group in these nice long rows, shoulder to shoulder, marching in an open blank field towards another group of guys doing the exact same thing. So it didn't matter how accurate it was, as long as you hit somebody in that mass pile of men, well then you did your job. So if I'm aiming at you, but I hit you, guess what? You're still on the opposite side. So it works in European warfare, but here in the New World, not so much. There's actually no evidence or no record that any Native American was actually killed by this weapon. So why bother bring it? Why did DeSoto think to bring it?
Scare tactic.
precisely to scare them, because this is what we call shock and awe, because the Native Americans had never seen or heard anything like this before. And so they have nothing to compare it to but elements of nature. So if this goes off, you have a really loud boom, followed by a flash of fire and smoke. Well, what else in nature causes a big boom and a flash in the sky? Thunder and lightning. So DeSoto is able to convince several Native Americans that he's some sort of a god from another world that can harness these natural elements of thunder and lightning in a stick. And so DeSoto, being the experienced and seasoned conquistador that he is, why is he going to fight for something when he knows he can just take it? And so he's going to use this as that source of fear, strike into the hearts of the natives and do just that. They're not going to want to resist, or they're not going to want to fight back, but they're immediately going to surrender and give them anything valuable they have. So this is how Soto is able to take what he wants, so to speak. Now, I'm going to go through a quick firing demonstration to show you how long it takes to load and fire this weapon. But in order to do that, I'm going to need your guys' help. So I'm going to have you guys test my skills as an arquebusier, because an average arquebusier, if you're really good, can get off maybe 2 to 3 shots a minute. And so, really good, you get off, 3. But so it takes about 20 seconds to load and fire and get off, just to get off one round. So I'm going to have you guys do is count for me. So when I say go, you're going to say 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. We're going to see if I'm able to get a shot off in at least 20 seconds. Think I can do it?
Boy.
Of course. Like, sure you can. Now, we are using real black powder, but for obvious reasons, I will not be shooting a real lead musket ball. There's a public beach on the other side of this wall. I don't want to fill out all that paperwork. And so my source of ammunition is this little paper wad, but it is still loud, so I will let you know when to plug your ears. When I say make ready, that's when you're going to want to go like this, okay guys? Because that's when it's going to go boom. Now, keep in mind that not all Native Americans were convinced that the guys carrying these weapons were gods. So just imagine what a nice stationary target I would be standing here having to get all the things I need in order to get that one shot off. I'd probably look something like a human porcupine by the time I'm able to get. Oh, great. You guys ready? Sure, I'm ready. Get set. Start counting.
1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, 6 Mississippi, 7 Mississippi, 8 Mississippi, 9 Mississippi, 10 Mississippi, 11 Mississippi, 12 Mississippi, 13 Mississippi,
Make ready!
14 Mississippi, 15
You're done good.
Yes.
All right. Was that 15?
15.
Nice. You got that on tape, so you can tell Dan to. All right. So, as you can see from the sight and sound, how if you had never seen anything like that before, how it'd be a little intimidating, a little scary. Now, leave you guys with a fun fact. There was another great source of this weapon. Is at the very, very end of the expedition. So other than a use of intimidation and fear for the natives, this is also how the remaining survivors are able to get out of the southeast. And so after DeSoto dies, 3 years in the expedition, these men, the remaining survivors, are ready to get the heck out of here. Well, out of the 700 plus men that came, only 311 make it back. Well, how do they make it back? There's no ships or planes or anything to take them back. So they start trying to march through Texas to Mexico. Well, what's in Texas?
Indians.
Nope. Well, that too. But a whole lot of desert. And so they realize early on that they're not going to make it if they keep trying to cut through Texas. And so they kind of have to go back to the drawing board and figure, what are we going to do? Because their supplies at this point in time were dwindling. They were pretty much much almost gone. These guys were having to boil down their leather boots for something to chew on. And, well, they're long out of black powder by this point in time. So how useful is this without black powder? It's not. So what the blacksmiths do is they take these guns apart and they melt down all the barrels. And so with these melted down metal pieces, they're able to make nails. And with those nails, they can make a barge. And with that barge, they're going to sail down the Mississippi River out into the Gulf where they can hug the shoreline and get to that Spanish outpost in Mexico. And so that is how those survivors are able to make it back and tell the story of the doomed expedition of DeSoto. And that's how we get the information from the, like, such as the chronicles, and how I'm able to tell you about it now.
Do you
But you
remember?
guys